35,000 Meta employees just signed up to train the AI that will replace them. They didn't know they were signing up. They were told they're signed up, and they don't get to opt out. And it gets worse. 3 days after Meta announced the program, the company laid off 8,000 employees. Most of the coverage I've read is treating this as a privacy story. It's not. I believe it's something else, and what happened could be a pattern for any of us who work on a computer for a living. Recently, Reuters broke the story of a new internal program called the Model Capability Initiative, or MCI. The program installs software on the work laptops of US-based full-time employees and contract workers. That software captures mouse movements, click locations, keystrokes, and periodic screenshots of what's on the employee's screen. Meta says the tool only runs on a pre-approved list of work apps, so it's not watching every moment of the workday. That much does appear to be true. But the pre-approved list is where it gets interesting, because CNBC followed up with a more detailed report shortly after Reuters broke the story. The pre-approved list includes Gmail, Google Chat, VS Code, GitHub, Slack, LinkedIn, Atlassian, Wikipedia, Google Search, and Meta's own internal tools. Some of those are developer-specific, like GitHub and VS Code, but tools like Gmail, Google Chat, Slack, Atlassian, LinkedIn, Google Search, these are the tools that most knowledge workers use every day, regardless of industry. When the rollout hit Meta's internal communications platform, the top-rated comment was, quote, "This makes me super uncomfortable. How do we opt out?" Meta's CTO, Andrew Bosworth, responded directly, "There is no opting out." Naturally, employees then asked about specific concerns, things like health information, financial information, personal files, and private email. Gmail is on the approved list after all. That means if an employee checks their personal email on their work laptop, MCI is watching. Bosworth's response? Well, don't do that on your work computer. That's the answer. If you don't like it, change your behavior. Many companies do allow for limited personal use of work computers, but now Meta employees should not use theirs unless they want their information captured by MCI. Meta's public justification is straightforward. They need training data. Specifically, they need examples of how humans actually use computers. They want information about how we navigate drop-down menus, how we use keyboard shortcuts, how we jump between apps. The leaked memo says that the company needs real examples of how humans interact with computers to train AI agents that can eventually do that work themselves. One more teeny detail. MCI is not being rolled out in Europe. European employees are exempt. Trust me, it's not because Meta made a thoughtful, ethical choice. The simple fact of the matter is that GDPR and EU worker protections make MCI illegal there. Must be nice. So those are the facts as far as we know now. MCI is a real thing and its purpose is clear and spelled out. The list of monitored apps is a list of tools almost every knowledge worker uses in some capacity. For Meta employees, there's no opt-out. And the only reason any Meta employees are protected is because they happen to live in jurisdictions that wrote their laws differently. That's the company's version of the story. Now, let me show you why none of it really makes sense unless you understand what was happening to Meta's business in the months before MCI launched. Meta didn't roll out an employee surveillance program because they suddenly felt like it. They did it because of three things happening simultaneously, and once you see them together, the whole thing starts to click. First, Meta is on track to spend up to $135 billion on AI infrastructure this year. That's an absurd amount of money. $135 billion. Most of it will be spent on NVIDIA chips and data center build-outs because that's where the future of tech seems to be going. Whoever owns the infrastructure wins the AI wars. That $135 billion figure is a number that requires investor patience, and investor patience requires visible progress on agents that actually work. To put that number in perspective, Meta's total revenue in 2025 was just under $201 billion. They're spending the equivalent of about 2/3 of their entire annual revenue on AI infrastructure alone. Not on R&D for AI, not on hiring AI researchers, on the infrastructure, the chips and the buildings to put them in, because whoever owns the infrastructure, you get the point. The bet behind the $135 billion number is that whoever owns the most AI infrastructure wins the next era of tech. Mark Zuckerberg has said this publicly and more than once. The view across most of Silicon Valley right now is that AI is a winner-take-most market, and the companies that don't build out processing power now will be permanently locked out later. Whether that's true or not, it's how every major AI company is operating, and Meta is spending like they believe it. But spending that much only works if it produces something investors can see. You can't keep telling Wall Street, trust us, the AI is coming, forever. At some point, the AI has to do something meaningful, and the thing AI has to do is be an agent that works. Like, that does actual work, software that can do real tasks the way a human employee would. Which means Meta needs agents to work, not someday, soon, ideally by their next earnings call. Second, the AI industry is running out of training data, and the wall is closer than most realize. To understand why this matters, you have to understand how language models like ChatGPT got built. They were trained on essentially the entire open internet, anything not nailed down to the ground. This includes digitized and sometimes physical versions of books, Wikipedia, news archives, technical documentation, public code, pretty much anything written down and published on the internet. Years of scraping the public internet all vacuumed up into the training process. And that well's running dry. The research group Epic AI estimates the total inventory of high-quality, human-generated public text at about 300 trillion tokens. Their projection is that AI companies will use all of it up somewhere between 2026 and 2032, with their estimate landing in 2028. But some think it's even closer than that. In December 2024, co-founder and former chief scientist of OpenAI, one of the most respected researchers in modern AI, gave a talk where he said, quote, "Pre-training as we know it will end, and we've achieved peak data and there will be no more." A month later, Elon Musk echoed the same view on a CES livestream, saying the total sum of human knowledge had been exhausted in AI training, quote, basically last year. The exact date is debated. The direction is not. The clean, well-structured text that produced every major upgrade between AI models doesn't have a sequel sitting on a server somewhere waiting to be scraped. So if you're building the next generation of AI and the old training data is running out, you have a problem. You need new data, and it has to come from somewhere the old data didn't. There are a few candidates being explored across the industry. Synthetic data, where AI generates training material for the next AI, multimodal data like video, audio, and images, and the one that matters for this story, agent data. Recordings of humans actually using software to do real work. The mouse movements, the keystrokes, the screenshots of what was on the screen when the human made a decision. That's a problem with no obvious solution. Where do you get high-quality recordings of humans doing knowledge work at the scale a major AI company needs? And that brings us to the third piece. Meta paid $14.3 billion in June 2025 for a 49% stake in Scale AI. Not only that, they put Scale's co-founder, Alexander Wang, in charge of Meta Superintelligence Labs. Wang's entire business at Scale was harvesting workflow data from contractors. That's what they did. They paid humans to perform tasks in specific ways so the data could be used to train AI. In an interview a year before Meta hired him, Wang explained the problem he was going to solve. In hindsight, it sounds kind of like a job description. He said, quote, "There's no pool of really valuable agent data that's just sitting around anywhere. And so we have to figure out how to produce really high quality data." So put it together. Meta is making a $135 billion bet that needs to produce results. The cleanest training data is gone. They recently bought up half of the company that solved this exact problem with contractors and put that company's founder in charge of their AI arm. What does that tell us? It certainly doesn't tell us that MCI is just an encroachment on employee privacy or another attempt at corporate surveillance. What it tells us is that MCI is the execution of the strategy that was already in motion when Meta wrote the check for Scale AI. Put plainly, Meta is pulling out a second product from the same paycheck. The first is the work employees were hired to do. The second is the training data harvested from employees doing the work. The very same data that will be used to build the AI agents that their CEO has publicly said will replace big teams. Let's say it a different way. Meta is demanding a second product from the same paycheck. The work plus the training data needed to build the agents that replace the workers. This is the deal Meta employees didn't know they were making. They thought they were signing up to do their jobs. Turns out, they were also signing up to be a training set. How can I be certain? First, Zuckerberg has said the quiet part out loud. On Meta's Q4 2025 earnings call, Mark Zuckerberg said, quote, "We're starting to see projects that used to require big teams now be accomplished by a single, very talented person." Then internally, in the Bosworth memo explaining MCI, the thought behind it was that agents will primarily do the work while employees direct, review, and help them improve. Said externally on an earnings call, big teams become one person. Internally, agents do the work, you direct. These are the same vision told to two different audiences. One is for investors, one is for the people training the agents. They're telling you exactly what's coming. And the timing isn't coincidence. The MCI memo leaked on April 21st. A couple days later, Meta confirmed a 10% layoff, 8,000 people plus 6,000 open positions that won't be filled. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. I am not saying the person whose keystrokes got logged on Tuesday is the same person who got laid off a couple days later. I'm saying these are the same stories. They're the same strategy on the same week, downstream of the same plan that started with Scale AI earlier. To make things worse, Meta had alternatives, but they chose this path. And I think this is the most important point. Meta owns 49% of Scale AI. They have the entire Scale infrastructure for paying contractors to generate training data. They could have done just that. They've got the budget. I mean, they're spending $135 billion this year. Paying third-party contractors is a rounding error against a number that large. Instead, they chose employees and contractors on Meta's paper because the additional cost of harvesting from that group is essentially zero. They're already in the system. They're already on payroll. And now Meta gets that sweet, sweet training data for the same amount of money they were already spending. Paying Scale contractors for that same data is a new line item, but paying employees for it is a line item that already existed. And on top of that, employees can't refuse without forfeiting their jobs. You can opt out by quitting is not consent in any meaningful sense of the word. This is the deal Meta employees didn't know they were making. The agreement was do your job and get paid. The new transaction after the fact is do your job, get paid, and provide the training data that builds the agent that replaces the next person hired for your role. Now let me explain how MCI actually works, because the architecture is the part most coverage is missing. MCI is a whitelist-based capture system, not a full surveillance tool. The software runs locally on an employee's work laptop and only activates when a pre-approved application has focus. When you open Slack, the screen capture wakes up. When you switch to a non-approved app like a personal note-taking tool, the screen capture goes idle. What gets captured is more interesting. They get some keystrokes, yes, but they also get the combination of inputs in screen state. Mouse coordinates plus what was at those coordinates. Keystrokes plus what was visible on screen when those keystrokes happened. This is how you train an agent to use a computer as a human would. You need to know what the human was looking at when they made the decision to click. That's the part that explains why this is so different from older monitoring software. Traditional employee monitoring captures behavior for compliance, like did this person send proprietary data outside the company? MCI captures behavior to be copied. It captures what the right next action is when a menu is open and an email thread is in a certain state. That data flows into Meta Superintelligence Labs, or MSL. The public doesn't know how MSL is structured, but we know Wang runs it, and we know it's where Scale's workflow harvesting expertise was supposed to land. And we know Meta has been building dedicated agent training infrastructure since at least mid-2025. To some, this might sound familiar in a different context. Whitelist-based capture, tracking behavior tied to the state of a user interface and pairing activity to context for repetition. This is the same process that goes into building any robotic process automation system or agent framework. The only thing novel about MCI is the data source. Everything else is well understood engineering, which means every other company building agents has the same architecture available to them. They just have to decide whether to point it at their employees. As hard as it is for me, let's take a second and be fair to Meta. I'm sure the comments have already rolled in, and yes, one thing that has always been true. Work computers have always been monitored. Meta's lawyers are right when they say employees have no reasonable expectation of privacy on corporate hardware. I learned that in business school too. Your company can already read your Slack messages, audit your Git commits, and log your IT activity. None of that is new. MCI isn't introducing surveillance for the first time. What it's doing is repurposing existing surveillance for a new goal, harvesting training data. Secondly, Meta's data problem is a real problem. Whether you believe limitations in AI training data sets need to be resolved is a different argument, but there is, as far as Meta is concerned, a legitimate business problem that could jeopardize their survival in the new age of technology. Wang wasn't bluffing in that interview. Training AI agents to use computers the way humans do is a gap in capability. You can't build a working Slack agent without examples of how humans use Slack. The data has to come from somewhere. If it doesn't come from employees, it comes from contractors, or users, or scraped data. None of those are great options either. Honestly, Meta could argue this is the least bad version. Internal data is probably higher quality than data scraped off the internet. Employees at least know MCI is happening, even if they can't refuse. Let's compare this to Meta hypothetically hiring a sweatshop of contractors in a country with weak labor laws. Using your own employees who are protected by US labor law looks almost ethical. It's a low bar, but at least it's a bar. And if it's any consolation, not everyone will be replaced. The ideal state of AI that Meta pitches where agents do the work while humans direct is a possibility. Some knowledge work will become more valuable, not less. Engineers who can effectively direct fleets of agents may end up more productive and better paid than the engineers of 2025 ever were. I do think this outcome is possible. I'm not sure it's the outcome we'll get, but it's a possible ending. Granting all of that, the specific choice Meta made was not the only choice available to them. They own half of Scale AI, and they have the budget to pay contractors. Yet, they chose employees because they already pay them, and the only way they can refuse is to quit. And even if the optimistic future is real, even if agents do the work while humans direct becomes the new shape of knowledge work, we already know what Meta does when a role becomes more efficient. They cut headcount just like every other public tech company, and the stock market will rejoice. They're doing it again right now, and this time in the same week they rolled out MCI. The employees providing the training data have watched this movie before. They know how it ends. My optimism earns Meta the benefit of the doubt on what they've stated. It doesn't earn them the benefit of the doubt on how they'll use the results. I don't believe this is an outlier, and I doubt you do. My guess is that this is closer to a template. It's a repeatable pattern that tech companies seem to be ramping up into. So let's give the pattern a name. Call it workforce data harvesting. Or if you prefer an historical parallel, we can call it Taylorism for white-collar work. In the early 1900s, factory managers stood over workers with stopwatches, breaking down skilled labor into measurable actions. The goal was to standardize the work, speed it up, and give it to cheaper workers. They called it scientific management. The workers called it de-skilling. MCI does the same thing to knowledge work. It'll capture the motions and standardize them. Then, finally, it'll hand them off to a cheaper worker. The only difference is that this time the cheaper worker isn't human. There's no more manager with a stopwatch and a notebook writing out processes, just a cold machine snapping screenshots and logging the keystrokes of an employee just trying to pay their bills. Every company that's racing to build knowledge worker agents has the same data problem Meta has. Some of them will solve it with contractors. Some of them will solve it quietly by harvesting the behavior of their own users through product telemetry. And some of them are going to solve it the way Meta is. The problem is the same across companies, but the impact is not going to be the same across geographies. I mentioned earlier that MCI isn't being rolled out in Europe. GDPR and EU worker protections make it illegal there. So Meta excluded the EU and proceeded with the rest of the workforce. They simply went where the law allowed it and stopped where it didn't. That tells you most of what you need to know about the legal floor for US workers on corporate hardware. The answer to what data rights do US workers have is basically none. We'll see if that answer is going to get tested. Meta's employees are training the AI agents that will replace them. I wish that were a hot take. Unfortunately, it's what the CEO said on an earnings call and what the CTO said in an internal memo. What Meta is building works because employees do their jobs in Gmail, Slack, and a web browser. It's the same places many of us do our work. So whatever this produces, we're not immune. Workforce data harvesting is the next phase of AI development, and I think the consent problem is unsolved, and I think we should stop calling this a privacy story and call it by its true name. But I'm curious where you stand. Have you seen these patterns too? Does anyone actually know what happens to the data these tools collect? Would this feel different if MCI and layoffs happened at different times? Let me know what you think in the comments. Until then, I'll see you in the next video.